Welcome to a Calvinian architecture on this beautiful, still winter afternoon. I'm reading from the third octave, 7th chapter. The name of the city is Eutropia. The first verse of the 7th chapter is my translation of the Calvino city, Eutropia. And verses 2 and 3 are stories about a journey and a space I wanted to live in, a house I wanted to live in, somewhere in the world. Verse 2. I'm sitting at the end of the Molo Audace, a long granite pier jutting out into Trieste's harbour. I'm looking into the water. It's early morning and the pier is deserted. Behind me, the city is still. I've always thought of silence not as a void, a place empty of imagination, but as a space filled with a pure sound of redemption. If I would have to describe its shape, it would be that of the mandala, the segment created by two intersecting circles, the space in which opposites may be reconciled and integrated. Consequently, for me, silence is filled with the sound of an alignment taking place. Here, nothing needs doing, and no further interaction with the world is required. In this place, I'm happy to sing. The last crossed-out entry in Franz Kafka's Reflections on Sin, Suffering, Hope and the True Way provides the closest description of this strange state that yet I have found. Its crossing out suggests that Kafka probably intended to revise it, but never did. He writes, "There is no need for you to leave the house. Stay at your table and listen. Don't even listen, just wait. Don't even wait. Be completely silent and alone. The world will offer itself to you to be unmasked. It can't do otherwise. In raptures, it will writhe before you." I have imagined this house, this table, even the world offering itself, writhing enraptured before the sitter. It all takes place in a burning hot silence, yet someone is singing softly. I can imagine it because it's also the house of my childhood, only a few streets away from here. A brisk breeze has risen up now and stirs the water. Little waves make lapping, clapping sounds as they meet the pier's granite mass. Long train or car journeys through new landscapes also engender a silence that seems to envelop all my senses. The scenery dreamingly unfolding before me becomes so hypnotic that I long for it to not end. But the silences I can never forget are those that were deeply punctuated by sound. Even so, I can only remember noiselessness emanating from sound like concentric ripples spreading over the surface of the water, away from the source of its disturbance, from the source of its penetration. I remember this. One evening in the winter of 1958, my family and I were standing outside a house in Brighton, taking our leave after a Sunday afternoon visit to my parents' friends. Winter sunshine in the backyard, Trieste songs, red wine, much laughter, a happily noisy badminton tournament. Suddenly, two loud gunshots rang out from a house a few doors down, and then just as suddenly, a silence engulfed us all. The deep silence that always follows sudden outbursts of tremendous sound. Visitors and hosts stood frozen, speechless in the empty streets for many minutes. Eventually we turned homewards after a few muttered goodbyes. For many years, whenever I've walked past those houses on the way to North Brighton Station or to the shops, I wondered what had occurred that night. It was never discussed in our house and has never been mentioned since, Yet I cannot forget how deeply chilling that silence was. How in its centre the tenuous agreement between the aliens that we were and the alien land that had taken us in was instantly dissolved, never to be reconstituted again. It's now mid-morning on the pier. I look back towards the city and in a sudden rush, its voice overwhelms me. There are many people about, strolling and talking, some even fish. It's time to make my way to the station and wait for the train back to Venice. I'm cheered by the thought of sitting in an empty carriage, looking out to sea until I reach my destination. As I walk back along the pier, I see an old man sitting on the stone edge, legs dangling over the water. He's pushing down with both of his arms, leaning out to look at something moving beneath the water's green surface. As I pass, I can hear him singing softly to himself. This is verse 3. Our room in Trieste had 2 small windows that looked down on Via del Bosco. Across the narrow street there was a cinema called the Aurora, which is Italian for dawn. On hot summer nights, lying in bed sleeplessly with windows opened, you could hear Italian voices through the cinema's open doors, dubbing Brando, Crawford, Davis, Fonda. You'd have to imagine all the visuals, the rooms and the buildings, cities and landscape that all these disembodied voices found themselves in. On chilly winter evenings, the glass doors would close. You couldn't hear anything then. But if you kneeled at the windowsill, on the pillows my grandmother would bring from the beds, you could just make out the bottom of the screen, revealing feet, legs, shoes, car tires, locomotive wheels, panting horses' hooves, swirling waves of foreign seas, great expanses of green lawns, all in silence. So you'd have to make up the dialogue and the plot to fit the glimpsed strips of scenery, and only if you were a child, because the position would be far too uncomfortable for adults. My sister and I would describe the scenes in a running commentary, and the adults would contribute to the plot construction, all done very rapidly, with no hesitation. Well, in order to find inspiration for the often contradictory images I had to describe, I would at times glance at a particular spot on the wall between the windows where the strangest object had been hung. A shoe brush resting on a small wooden shelf. It was our only ornament except for the little landscape painting my father had commissioned from a friend of his. This little ornament had been made as an architectural motif in the shape of a country house, with balconies, verandas, chimneys, the lot. The brush itself rested on the house's mock first-floor balcony. Between peering at distant technicolor patches, I at times imagined I lived inside that brush house somewhere, and I would secretly construct and enact the plot within its infinite interior. Occasionally, I still think about all the rooms inside that house. On the odd winter night, I climb its wall and enter through the bristles. Then I make my way up to the living room so I can look out of its windows, down onto where we are all still living. Tomorrow, the 3rd octave, the 8th chapter, and the city is Zemrude. The keynote is me, and the colour is yellow. Have a peaceful afternoon until tomorrow.